All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you. Got Coach Dustin with me. Brad is away. We'll see Brad back in a week or two here. So listen, tonight, a very cool episode, something that I've been wanting to talk about and go a little bit deeper. We've mentioned this in the past, but I wanted to really kind of dive deeper on this. And tonight's episode is titled Shock and Awe. And the shock and awe concept, I just want to set it up for everybody real quick, for those that aren't familiar with it, and just make sure everyone's on the same page. But a general definition of the shock and awe concept is a display of overwhelming power, spectacular displays of force, with the agenda of paralyzing the enemy's perception of the battlefield and destroy their will to fight. Okay, so overwhelming power, spectacular displays of force, paralyze the enemy's perception of the battlefield, destroy their will to fight. That is what shock and awe is. Tonight, I want to break it down, and I want to go deep, and I want to help everyone understand how we, quote unquote, the average man, can use the shock and awe strategy and tactics to accomplish our end mission, which is to not just survive in the face of violence, but thrive. It's going to be a great episode. Stick with us. Back in a few seconds, and we're going to dive in. Every day I hear more stories of good people being brutally assaulted and murdered by some individual who has a repeat history of violent offenses, drug addiction, and mental health issues, who is free to walk the streets in the same city where I live, work, and where I am raising my two daughters. Well, I'm tired of screaming at the TV, and enough is enough. Throughout history, there have always been men willing to answer the call to the threats against our way of life. Well, today, that threat is right outside our doors, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, on our public transportation system, outside the places we work, and even outside of our children's schools. My new mission is to create and train a group of men that believe in the right to life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life, his family, and his property. I'm Greg LaBeouf. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, so listen, tonight we're going to break down the shock and awe strategy. I give a quick definition of it before we cut to the intro. Overwhelming power, spectacular displays of force, paralyze the enemy's perception of the battlefield, and destroy their will to fight. Now, just for a little bit of deeper context, this concept of shock and awe has been referred to in the past as rapid dominance. And the kind of shock and awe concept was introduced, if I look back at my notes here, in 1996 at the United States National Defense University is kind of when it was introduced. And most people, if they're familiar with the shock and awe concept, absolutely would equate this to the U.S. military. And so when we talk about the ingredients that make up shock and awe, overwhelming power, most people can look and go, okay, the United States military, one of the biggest, strongest, most technologically advanced militaries in the world. And so, they wage a campaign on an enemy, and it is shock and awe. It is just relentless bombings and air raids and just, missiles taking out strategic targets and just literally this overwhelming display of power. It is, if they are on battle lines, if you are just, rolling out massive amounts of equipment and artillery and, again, it's just this overwhelming kind of display of what your prowess or your power is. Spectacular displays of force. Then all of a sudden, all of these assets are being brought to bear in again, kind of this relentless barrage and assault, which of course, you can easily overwhelm most armies, most enemies, right? So tonight we're talking about how the shock and awe strategy and the tactics can be utilized by the quote-unquote average man when we are, for all intents and purposes, outgunned, outmanned, they're bigger, they're stronger, there's more of them, they have the initiative, all of this different stuff, okay? Because the shock and awe strategy, or what is called rapid dominance, is very much a part of our kill chain. It is very much a part of our fundamental strategies that we use. So I want to dissect this a little bit and show people how, again, we can use this when we are faced with violent predatory criminals. So just real quick, Dustin, and there might not be a ton that you want to throw down range off this, but just visceral comments on shock and awe and what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I think, even when you gave people kind of the more formal definition of it, I think it's an absolutely great sales pitch. I mean, how does someone listen to that? And as assuming you are the weaker, less skilled, person out there, like, I mean, somebody gives me that sales pitch, I'm like, I'm in. I'll sign up for that. Like, yeah, like that sounds like an extremely effective strategy or way of like going about my own personal defense. Absolutely. So I think that's a big, big part of it. Is just it's the overarching, not ingredient, but like it's the overarching thing you need
Yeah.
if you're not the biggest, strongest, best fighter out there. Like, there's no two ways about it. It's just you have to have it.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is even just the way that you set it up, because of course you understand what we're going to unpack because you're
Mm-hmm.
well versed in this and you understand the importance of this within our kill chain and our training methodologies. But that's where I think a lot of people would look and say, okay, but that doesn't make sense because what you just said is what a great sales pitch for somebody that truly understands that in a violent confrontation, you will be outgunned, outmanned, bigger, stronger people, superior tools, superior weapons, superior numbers, all that type of stuff. And then you're telling me, though, that I should use shock and awe when what this other guy just said was that shock and awe is an overwhelming display of superior power. It is, a spectacular display of force. And so something doesn't add up. It's 1 + 1 = 3 here. So let's do this for the first thing. Rapid dominance. I like this because there's another term that we use which is called relative superiority. And relative superiority is a military, strategy and tactics. It's a military, way of thinking, and it basically simply means that if you look at two people on paper, so you look again at the bad guys, bigger, stronger, better, outgunned, outmanned. They have the initiative. They have all of this stuff. The deck is stacked in their favor. Then there is the smaller, weaker individual. Smaller, weaker, outnumbered, out-equipped doesn't mean you're helpless. It just means that those elements are not in your favor. Well, relative superiority means that there are things, actions you can take, mindsets that you must possess, right? And typically, again, the mindsets, the strategies, the tactics will guide the actions. But there's actions that you can take. So imagine again, you move a piece on the chessboard, and in that moment, and maybe it only lasts for fractions of seconds, but in that moment, you gain relative superiority, meaning all things being equal in that moment, you now are the superior force. And people often don't understand that. But it's like this is again, it's just an analogy, but this is chess moves. So at the beginning of a situation, you are the weaker, smaller, lesser individual, and then all of a sudden you make one real smart strategic tactical move. And in that moment, you have relative superiority. And in that moment, you can relay tremendous damage. You can change the tide of an entire situation. So now, relative superiority, or you could say, oh shit, I'm outgunned, outmanned, bigger, stronger people, all this stuff, but I do something. I employ a strategy, I employ tactics with the right mindset. And in that moment, I establish rapid dominance. And so I want people to understand very clearly that shock and awe, rapid dominance, relative superiority, you can think of these things as timers. And meaning that when you make the right strategic or tactical moves, you gain that shock and awe, you gain that relative superiority or rapid dominance, you gain that, and there's a timer on it. So you might gain that for a fraction of a second or 1 or 2 seconds. But in that fraction of a second or that 1 or 2 seconds, that can be the blow that severely mitigates or even nullifies your adversary's advantages. Now, they're bigger, they're stronger, there's more of them, they have superior tools, they have superior positioning. I just listed off 5 elements that they have, 5 ingredients. And yet, with the right mindset, the right strategical and tactical understanding, you can make a move, and for a fraction of a second, you could mitigate or nullify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever of their advantages. So again, I just want things to be real clear. If a guy has superior numbers, there's things you can do to make their numbers less impactful. That means you mitigated the effectiveness of their numbers, or you've reduced the effectiveness of their tools, or whatever it happens to be. This is an important concept to get, because we are the only survivable value for us, and you can attest to this, is we must always train. The survivable value lies in us training from the perceptual standpoint that we are in fact outgunned, outmanned by bigger, stronger, better equipped, better positioned, individuals. And if any of that is not true, if they do not possess superior equipment, and we happen to be armed and they're unarmed, right? Yet there are numbers in them, which again makes them dangerous. But if any of those ingredients aren't there, well, then that's okay. That's good. But we are always operating from the standpoint that we are outgunned, outmanned, bigger, stronger, all that type of stuff. So this becomes very important to the overall context of what we're going to talk about. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think too, just to kind of reiterate, something like relative superiority, like you said, on the 5 things, someone might be able to take away 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I think that's kind of the key thing, is it's like, yes, we're always talking about someone who's bigger, stronger, there's more of them, all that stuff, outpositioned, outmanned, outgunned, all of it. But I think people also have to understand that, like, that statement isn't in absolute at all times. And I think that's the whole point of relative superiority. You might have the position on me, but that doesn't mean it can't change. It doesn't mean I can't find that moment in time where I can gain the superior position.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, same with the numbers, I'm outnumbered. But if I move through a doorway, well, they're going to come through that doorway 1 at a time, not 3 at a time.
Yeah.
So now I've just mitigated being outnumbered for a brief moment in time.
That's right.
So that's my whole point, is kind of like, just because you are outnumbered, outpositioned, whatever it might be, there are moments of time where that is no longer true. And
Yes.
if you take action in those moments, that is how you then catapult yourself to a position of power where you can be more of an overwhelming force, like the definition that we're unpacking.
100%. And that's I'm glad you expanded on that, because again, I just want to come at it from different angles so people are clear with that. And again, you say, well, this coming through a doorway, they have to come through 1 at a time for fractions of a second if they're sprinting and chasing you and trying to get you. Yes. But that is what you must understand when you are controlling this, when you are actually guiding this, directing this, manipulating the environment and manipulating that's what strategies and tactics are. It is the manipulation of the battlefield. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share right now, again, before we go any further, I'll just share there's 4 kind of ingredients that they'll also talk about when they teach or talk about, shock and awe. And maybe I don't even know if I'll get through all 4 of them right now, but one of them is a near total or absolute knowledge and understanding of self, adversary, and environment. And I'll just say that again, right? A near total or absolute knowledge and understanding of self, adversary, and environment. Now, people might go, what do you mean, man? A total or absolute knowledge and understanding of yourself, the adversary, and the environment? That's not as difficult as it sounds. We have to know ourselves, meaning, what the fuck are our strategies? Like, this is why there is no such thing as tough anymore. You're either trained or untrained. You can have a guy that has good natural instincts. The guy's no stranger to aggression or even to violence, right? So he's been there, kind of done that. But if you don't have, if you're not strategically and tactically trained, then as good as your raw, natural mindset and skill set is, even backed by experience, that can be honed to a much higher degree. Like, because that's what like a military college is. That's what becoming a general, like a strategic thinker, like somebody who has been trained. Training isn't always this massive difference in skill set. Sometimes it is. It's very apparent, but many times, the right training, the surgical training, is what puts you ahead by fractions of seconds and fractions of inches. And that is often the difference between living and dying when it comes to combat. So sometimes, yeah, it's a massive difference. The other person is just literally completely outclassed, by your skill, knowledge, mindset, all that type of stuff. So this understanding of when you train, what is my strategy? I use the word kill chain. I'm going to dive into this, but what is my kill chain? What does my adversary want? This is why we study criminality. Most people, when they're teaching self-defense, what they do is they constantly teach solutions. They teach their art, and they know their art really, really well. But they don't study criminality, so they don't understand the adversary. I mean, you can't sit there and say, I've been studying martial arts for 30 years. Okay, but how much time have you spent studying criminality? Like really studying it in depth, like keep your finger on the pulse of what these guys are doing. Do you understand their blueprints? Do you understand their objectives and methodologies? Like, I mean, that is a lifelong pursuit and study, you know, and it's like, so you got to know the adversary. And then when you're doing all this stuff, you got to train and understand the environment. Because whenever, you know, we're talking about average people, again, being out, living life, and this is where our battlefield is. It's in our homes, it's outside our homes, it's on our streets, it's on our way to work, it's outside our schools. I mean, this is our battlefield. So we got to understand how to manipulate these environments. Okay, so anyways, so let's go into this. Overwhelming power. Now, yes, if you're the U.S. military, or again, and let's draw that to us, if you're 6'8", you know, 395 pounds of rippling muscle and some of the most ungodly natural talent or trained skills on the planet, then you might be in possession of overwhelming power, right? And if you have that, feel free to use that, right? Unfortunately, I don't have that. I know the people we train don't have that. So then you say, okay, well, Greg, how the fuck, if we're going to run this shock and awe strategy, what is our substitute? Overwhelming power. Well, I look at it this way. The word overwhelming is very, very powerful, but it doesn't have to be with overt physical power. I would substitute overwhelming power with a couple words, right? One of those words is kill chain. And so let me explain that. What is a kill chain? This is exactly the way I train all of our guys. If you do, like our foundational course, we have 11 overall strategies. These 11 strategies, you can put them into what we call a kill chain, meaning that you can organize them in a way to solve problems, right? To solve the problem of violence. What I tell people is that when I show you each of these individual strategies and their tactics and tools within one strategy, the strategy, the tactics, and the tools, I want people to understand the power in that. But know this, a single strategy with its tactics and tools, no matter how good it is,